1 year ago, the skies above Dhaka were lit not by celebration but by fire. In the days leading up to August 5th, 2024, Bangladesh was in revolt, and as Sheikh Hasina fled the country by helicopter, chased out by a tidal wave of student protests and a population exhausted by her authoritarian rule, it looked for a brief moment like change had finally arrived for those who were seeking one. The streets overflowed with cheers. Democracy, it seemed, for some, was on the horizon. But 12 months on, what remains is not hope, it is uncertainty. From violent communal flare-ups to deepening youth unemployment, from an emboldened Islamist resurgence to an overwhelmed interim regime. Bangladesh's revolution has not yet delivered its redemption. Dhaka is trapped in a dangerous limbo. Youth unemployment has soared. Religious minorities live in fear. Islamist forces once banned are rising again. And the revolution that toppled a strong woman now risks being hijacked by chaos. So was Hasina's fall the beginning of a new future or the unraveling of the old order without a plan for what comes next? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Under Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh performed very well, but there were problems. The protests that shook Bangladesh to its core weren't just about job quotas. They were about decades of suppressed frustration, a youth left out of the system, political repression that stifled dissent according to some, and an economy that boomed only for the elite. The quota reform movement was the spark. The explosion was inevitable. For years, more than half of civil services positions were reserved for specific groups: women, war veterans' families, the disabled. But behind the numbers was a deeper resentment, the belief that the system had been rigged and that merit had no place in Hasina's Bangladesh. According to the United Nations, more than 1,400 people were killed during the uprising in July and August of 2024. The streets turned into battlegrounds. Police stations were torched. Protesters, many of them students, were gunned down. Entire neighborhoods went up in smoke. It was not just a protest, it was a rupture.
Well, 1 year after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, the Bangladeshis would well be asking themselves a question that did they jump from the frying pan into the fire? Because the current state of Bangladesh's economy is dire. The economy was projected to grow at 4.1%. It's now believed to be growing only at about 3.4%. The World Bank says that it's one of the slowest growth of Bangladesh's economy in 36 years. And inflation is up, investment is down, there's political uncertainty, there's chaos, there's violence. All of this would mean that Bangladesh's job creation would be severely affected. The unemployment which was there already in the country last year has only gotten worse because every percentage dip in the GDP numbers means that so many more people will be unemployed, and that's bad news for Bangladesh's youth dividend, the youth bulge that depends on jobs to keep them gainfully employed. So this is a very, very dire situation right now for Bangladesh 1 year after Sheikh Hasina's ouster.
Into that rupture stepped Muhammad Yunus, Nobel Laureate, microfinance pioneer, and the reluctant architect of an interim regime who also was better known as the bête noire of Sheikh Hasina. Backed by military factions and opposition leader, Yunus promised to chart a new course. 11 reform commissions, a push for national unity, and a timeline for elections. But democracy, it turns out, is not just about removing the old, it's about building the new. And in that task, Bangladesh remains adrift. The student movement that toppled Hasina now finds itself sidelined. Political parties meant to usher in the next chapter, the BNP and others, are at loggerheads over election dates. The interim government wants April. BNP demands February. No agreement, no roadmap, just gridlock. Meanwhile, the economy is unraveling, and the revolution's children, jobless, restless, disillusioned, are still waiting for the new Bangladesh they were promised. Around 30% of Bangladeshi youth are neither employed nor in school or training. Among women, unemployment stands at 23%. The jobless rate is even higher in rural areas where factories have closed up, farms are struggling, and investments have dried up. The garment industry, long the backbone of Bangladesh's economy, is bleeding. Bangladesh's biggest conglomerate, Beximco Group, had to shut down over a dozen factories. More than 40,000 jobs vanished. Business leaders linked to the former government were either arrested or fled. Trade unions warned of collapse. Nothing came. And what of the global economy? The world hasn't stood still. In late 2024, the United States of America slapped a 35% tariff on Bangladeshi garment exports, a devastating blow to the country's largest industry. More recently, Trump imposed a 20% tariff on Dhaka, but now there's no US aid flowing in. Due to this, over 20,000 development workers lost their jobs and foreign investors pulled back. The interim government scrambled, hosting investment summits, announcing job training schemes, pledging to create 500,000 new positions. But without political stability, the money stayed away. Private sector investment dropped from 24% to 22.5% of GDP. Confidence vanished, and so did momentum. Nowhere is the stagnation more painful than among the students and workers who risked everything last year. They marched for dignity, for fairness, for a shot at a better life. But 1 year on, many of them remain unemployed, unheard, and increasingly unsure of what they fought for. But the post-Hasina transition has not only failed economically, it has faltered morally. In the political vacuum left behind, old ghosts are returning. Islamists, once in the shadows, are now back in the spotlight. Groups like Jamaat-e-Islami, banned for years, are holding massive rallies. Their messaging is louder, more aggressive, and more visible than at any time in the past decade. And it's not just slogans, it's actions on the ground, in communities, and increasingly in violence.
This interim regime of Yunus, which is basically backed by Jamaat-e-Islami, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and other Islamist forces, none of them are actually talking about election. And in fact, Jamaat is publicly telling that the election must not be held immediately. And this so-called demand from the civil society of reforms, civil society in Yunus Advisory Council, all of the members, they are from NGOs. And they are the so-called civil society, meaning they have captured power, as I mentioned, through a meticulously designed blueprint. And now those so-called civil society, they are talking about reform, because during the last 1 year there has been no visible result of reform. They are talking about reform to push the election to an indefinite period. And under such a situation, there is no sign of protecting the religious minorities, particularly Hindus. We know what happened recently on the 16th of June in Gopalganj in Bangladesh. It was a massacre where army were openly killing civilians, Hindus. So I in my opinion, Yunus does not want to hold an election. They have no desire of holding an election. They want to continue in power, and as one of the key allies of Yunus, the Islamic Constitution movement, the Peer of Chormonai, publicly said that they want to turn Bangladesh into Afghanistan. So yes, Bangladesh is heading towards becoming an Afghanistan.
Since Hasina's fall, Bangladesh has witnessed a disturbing rise in anti-Hindu attacks. Over 1,000 incidents were reported within just weeks of the collapse. Mobs looted homes, torched businesses, and desecrated more than 150 temples. 23 Hindus were killed, thousands more displaced. The state, mostly silent. Police presence was either absent or passive. Arrests were few, accountability even fewer. Even the interim government confirmed 88 major communal incidents between August and October 2024. Rights groups believe the real figure is significantly higher. Many of these attacks are linked to radical Islamist groups newly emboldened by the political upheaval. With Awami League out of power and the secular safeguards of the past weakening, Bangladesh's minorities now stand exposed. And it's not just Hindus. Sufi shrines have been attacked, secular bloggers harassed, women's rights groups threatened. The country's pluralist fabric, always fragile, is now being shredded by rising majoritarianism and religious populism.
For the last 1 year, what we are witnessing in Bangladesh is a clear genocide targeting Hindus, because these Islamists and religious bigots, they want to turn Bangladesh into a Hindu-free nation. This is not only that Yunus and his interim regime has crossed the red lines, but this has definitely posed a serious threat to regional security, because taking advantage of this situation, various international terrorist entities like Al-Qaeda, Hamas, they are openly visiting Bangladesh, holding meeting with their counterpart. So this is a very dangerous trend. And unfortunately, the so-called international community rights groups, they are shy in uttering a word condemning this ongoing genocide on Hindus. I think for the sake of regional security, for the sake of global peace, the ongoing genocide, atrocities, barbaric actions of the Yunus regime should come to an end.
Political analysts warn that if the Islamists continue to gain traction, the next elected government, whether BNP, a student coalition, or some new alliance, may be forced to appease them. That could mean policy rollbacks, compromise reforms, and an even narrower space for dissent. The interim government has repeatedly denied caving to Islamist demands, but on the ground, reality tells a different story. In village after village, clerics hold more sway than administrators. Radical factions intimidate voters, silence critics, and in many cases, override the authority of the state. This is not democracy in transition, it's a democracy in retreat. For Hindu communities especially, the fear is existential. With their political protector, the Awami League, dismantled and the state machinery in disarray, many are quietly fleeing. Some move to India, others vanish into Dhaka's slums. What they leave behind, shops, homes, temples, are too often reduced to ash. Meanwhile, the original architects of the uprising, the students, are themselves divided. Some have entered politics, forming a new party, demanding a complete constitutional overhaul before any election is held. They want guarantees of secularism, of equal rights, of true reform. Until then, they say, there can be no vote.
Well, the biggest problem in Bangladesh right now is political uncertainty. And you have this so-called chief advisor who's taken office a few days after Sheikh Hasina's ouster, and he's not very clear on when elections are going to be held. The opposition parties want elections to be held very quickly by 2025, but the chief advisor wants it to be held only in 2026. And the worst part of the bargain that the Bangladeshis have got is that the jails have been opened, the extremists have been allowed to run riot. That is causing huge anarchy within the country. Minorities are being targeted, Awami Leaguers are being hunted down. You could say that this is one of Bangladesh's worst spells of political uncertainty in several decades. It wasn't as bad in the 70s, it certainly wasn't as bad in the 80s, but in 2025, at a time when Bangladesh is poised to take the advantage of its youth dividend, its youth bulge, you're faced with political uncertainty, and nobody is investing in Bangladesh right now, because the very bottom line is that when you have extremism running riot, you have political uncertainty, businesses will not come to invest. And the fact that you have extremist groups, you have the Jamaat, which has now been, the ban on it has been lifted, it's now in full control, it's pushing pogroms literally against the minorities and people it doesn't like. That is very, very a dire situation really for Bangladesh and its people.
It's a bold demand, but it reflects a deeper truth. The system that collapsed with Hasina was broken long before she fled, and patching it up won't be enough. So what lies ahead? Right now, the option looks bleak. Hold elections too soon and risk violence, voter suppression, or a fractured mandate. Delay them too long and invite accusations of dictatorship, disenfranchisement, and international condemnation. The interim government walks a knife's edge. Sadly, it has not tried to restore legitimacy, but has thrived in chaos, making it irreversible because it does seem like many say in Bangladesh, Yunus is trying to hold on to power.
In September last year, during an event organized by the Clinton Global Initiatives, Muhammad Yunus publicly admitted that the anti-Hasina movement was a part of meticulous design, meaning they used this quota reform to allure their students and others, while actually the hardline Islamist and jihadist groups, including terrorist entities such as Hizb ut-Tahrir, Jamaat-e-Islami, even Ansar al-Islam, they all were part of this blueprint. And the entire thing was happening out of massive propaganda. On social media, they were running massive propaganda. Hundreds of police were killed. Interestingly, they were using sniper rifles. No one talks about it. Even Yunus does not talk about it. So this was whatever we may call, but it was not a revolution, nothing. It was definitely a terrorist plot to unseat a government and grab the country and ultimately establish a reign of terror.
That brings us back to the question we began with. Was this all worth it? The uprising claimed lives. It brought down a powerful yet a secular regime of Sheikh Hasina. It promised justice, dignity, and democracy. But what followed has been a maelstrom of division, delay, and danger. Revolutions are rarely clean, but they are judged not by what they tear down, but what they build. 1 year after Bangladesh tried to reset its future, the foundations of that new beginning remain incomplete. The ideals, equality, tolerance, opportunity have yet to be realized. And the longer that promise remains unfulfilled, the more likely it is that the next generation, the ones who believed in Professor Muhammad Yunus, rightly or wrongly so, the ones who protested, who dreamed, who believed, will stop waiting and start giving up. The story of Bangladesh is not over, but it has reached a crossroads. The choices are being made between the BNP, the Islamists, and a party that now has been banned. The Sheikh Hasina government that ruled Bangladesh today is under question for her performance, for her actions. But what about those who are right now in Dhaka and have done pretty little when it comes to reforms, justice, and peace? These are the things that will determine whether this remains a country in transition or becomes one in turmoil. Because when the crowd climbed the palace roof last August, they didn't just bring down Sheikh Hasina. They raised expectations for Bangladesh in their own way, and if those expectations collapse, the next fall may be far more dangerous. Thank you for watching Statecraft.